about how we've got as an historian, you got three elements to look at: Walt the man, Walt the company, Disney the company, and Disney the brand, how the public perceives it. And for example, the Disney company has its own internal archives. Dave Smith was hired in 1970 or 71 to sort of catalog everything that this company, which had been operating since 1923, to archive its history and understand its history. So the archives to outside researchers would be an ideal place to visit. Unfortunately, Disney's policy is it's for inside use only. I understand that. I respect that they want to control or have control over ultimately what is written, because Disney, the brand, has this humongous fan base, and people write blogs, do videos for it, books and magazines. I will first share with you, I write for a magazine called Celebrations. The website is celebrationspress.com. I have been writing for this magazine for about 10 or 11 years now, and it's a love letter to Disney, basically. The publisher also has a blog, a weekly podcast. I'm recording that with him tomorrow night. I first wrote for issue number 6, and right now they're on issue number 73. So I've been at this a while. Also, as a Disney historian, I found the Bob Thomas biography to be extremely helpful. Bob Thomas wrote, it's an American original Walt Disney. It breaks down so many segments of his life into unique chapters, because so many things that Walt did in his early years affected him mid-career and late career. I know we want to talk about how we could start on Marceline. That is where he was born in Chicago. Walt was the fourth of 5 children, 3 older brothers and 1 younger sister. His father was kind of moved to find a new job and take the family along. He was working in Chicago at the time, helping to do construction for the Columbian Exposition, which was the World's Fair being held in Chicago. Walt was born in the family home that today has been crowdsourced and purchased. There's now the Walt Disney birthplace home or childhood home in Chicago. The family moved to Marceline, Missouri. His dad was going to take up farming. They took over a farm that belonged to somebody else. And these were Walt's ideal formative years. Lived there about 5 years, roughly 1906, not sure the month, and they left in the spring of 1910. But this is where Walt got to let his imagination run wild. He would use a hot tar and a stick to draw animals on the side of the barn, something his father wasn't thrilled about. They had a nearby cottonwood tree near the family farm, and Walt called it his dreaming tree because it gave him a sense of adventure and curiosity. I'm not 100% sure, but the tree may be in some horticultural health issues right now. But the time there was relatively short. Walt had 3 older brothers, and when he was 9 years old, when Walt was 9, they left to move to Kansas City. His father bought a newspaper route, which was considerably more of a business venture than you would think today. But Walt was conscripted into delivering newspapers in the pre-dawn hours before school. Then he'd go to school and come home. He has, I will step back just a moment to Marceline, because one of the famous stories is that the desk he sat at he carved his initials on the wooden cover, WD, with a pocket knife. And that is on location, on display at the Walt Disney Museum there in Marceline. There's photos of it, just a real simple desk scratchings, almost like a carving on the bark of a tree. But he left this idyllic environment that really shaped and informed his outlook on life. Left to the big city of Kansas City. He was delivering newspapers and going to school. His mother sensed that Walt had an artistic side and wanted to develop it. So she helped him take some side art classes. Now this is 1917. The family returns to Chicago because his father has found an interest in a Jello factory, the Ozell Jelly Factory. Walt is still a minor. He's and this is the summer actually he was working as a railroad butcher. He alluded to this, Sally. He would be selling fruit, sodas, and newspapers on railroad to railroad passengers, and his Marceline is where he would come and stop. And he learned some hard lessons that, like some of the bottles which had deposits, he didn't get back in time, so he didn't get his deposit back. So he kind of learned some life lessons there on that job. Well, he's 16 years old, joins the family, his parents back in Chicago. His older brothers have emancipated themselves. His older brother Roy is in the Navy to support World War I. Walt's at age of 16 is a freshman in high school. He worked for the school newspaper, doing artistic work, sketches, comedies. Here's where his mother sent him to school, art school, for 3 nights a week. Now, he's itching to get away from all of his father's business ventures, which he seems to always get wrapped up in. It's 1918. He wants to join the war, but he's too young. With a friend of his, they agree that they're going to try out for the American Ambulance Corps. Make sure I have that right. Yeah, because the minimum age there is 17, whereas for the Army it's 18. So with his mother's blessing, she forged his documents to say that he was born in 1900, therefore making him eligible. He went through training to be an ambulance driver and everything that they would need to do.
Okay, you're in.
And as it turned out, the armistice was signed, ending the war before Walt ever shipped out. He was in Connecticut at this time, and still they needed some to move to volunteer to go over, and he was one of 50 that were selected. And he spent a year, maybe less, in France. And his responsibility was to stay with his equipment, his ambulance. Seeing the big city of Paris was an eye-opening experience for him. He was with his ambulance, and it broke down on the side of the road. He and a partner, their mission was to never leave the equipment alone. So Walt stayed with the ambulance while the partner went back to town to get help. His partner forgot all about it, fell asleep, and Walt spent the night in a cold French countryside doing his job, protecting the ambulance. But this was a defining moment. His time in there was relatively short, but once he returned to Chicago, he was a changed person. He did not want to finish school. He did not want to work with his dad in the factory. He wanted to return to Kansas City. And so in the early 1920s, I can't have a specific year, he heads out. His brother, yeah, his brother Roy and Herbert were there at the time. And with his modest savings from the ambulance corps, he went out to Kansas City, intent on being a newspaper illustrator. And he has some modest luck. He definitely did it. You know, he was a tough door-to-door salesman selling himself and his skills. He got some advertising work and ended up working for a company that does advertising. And he met another young artist. He was of Dutch descent. His first name is Ub or Ub, depending on how you pronounce it. He spelled it originally Ubbe, shortened it to just UB. And his last name's Iwerks, Iwerks. And this is a pivotal meeting in the history of Walt's life, because Ub plays a critical role in the rest of Disney's career and history. The two of them are working together in the advertising agency. It's the writing's on the wall that they can't both be hired. They decide to strike out on their own and form their own company. So they established in May of 1922, they incorporated a company called Laugh-O-Gram Films. And one of the things that they were experimenting with was live action and animation. They had initially just one, but it turned into a series of Alice comedies. This little girl named Alice, and she would interact with animated characters on the screen, but there was the whole process of filming a live person, doing the animation, and then merging the two. That's what Walt and Ub were learning on the fly. Well, they had a contract in New York with a producer, and that contract dried up, leaving Walt kind of one of his first big failure in life. He had to declare bankruptcy for Laugh-O-Gram Films. He's sort of back to square zero, not sure where to move next. His older brother, Roy, who is going to be prominent throughout his life as well, was in the Navy, and he's had tuberculosis from the war. So he's convalescing in the dry mountain air of Southern California. So they communicate by telegram. It's a different era. Says, Walt, come join me out here. We'll figure something out. So the image of Walt with his he wanted to project a lot of personal pride in this. So the story goes is that he had a flimsy cardboard box, a suitcase. He had what few belongings he had with him, and his clothes on his back, but he bought a first-class ticket because that's how he saw his life for city. He felt things could only go up. In arrival in Los Angeles, he stayed with a family uncle. This time Walt says, I'm not going to be an animator, I'm going to be a movie director, because Hollywood is the new groundswell of entertainment outside of New York City, except that nobody would hire him. So in October of that year, the producer in New York, who was funding his Alice comedies, he reconnects with her. Can we get this project rolling again? I've left Kansas City, I've left Laugh-O-Grams. I think we can get this off the ground here in Los Angeles. And to his pleasant surprise, his producer says, yes, we're going to fund several of these Alice comedies for you. They offered him flat rates for the film. So it was up to Walt to make the best quality product he could, because he was getting a flat rate. He talks to his older brother, Roy, and says, we're back in town, we're back in business. And so the date, October 16th, 1923, is when the contract is signed. And this is considered the official date that the Disney company was formed. Initially, I think it was the Disney Brothers studio, the Disney Brothers cartoon studio, Roy was more modest. He didn't want to be in the limelight. And it eventually, after a few years, settled on Walt Disney Productions, and it remained with that name for decades. So Walt has one series of movies under his belt, and he's created, a new character in 19. Let me see here. The studio is getting big enough so that they've moved to a new location in Los Angeles. They were working out of a back room of a real estate office, paying rent. By the time they got the 3 of these Alice comedies underway and some profits rolling in, they could move to a quote unquote studio space. 2719 Hyperion, which ironically is no longer there. It's a shopping center, a grocery store. There is a sign marker there that says this was once the Disney Studios. They created, Walt and company, Walt and Oog perhaps, created a new character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. In shape and form, looks very much like a Mickey Mouse. Taller ears, a little bit more, maybe some different clothing choices, but by and large, it's easily to see as a precursor to Mickey Mouse. So he is creating, to the same producer in New York. The New York producer was a lady, and she got married to a gentleman named Charles Mintz, and she sort of like turned over the business duties to Mintz. And Mintz thought he could fleece Walt. He felt that he wasn't getting a good enough quality product. It was a hit with the audiences, but Walt felt that they were not getting paid enough for the quality of the work they're putting out. So he and his wife head out to New York to negotiate a raise. And this meeting in it's either late 1927 or early 1928 was another pivotal moment of his life, because not only was he told face to face by Mintz that he was not going to get a raise, Mintz told him, I own the character Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. That's what you've legally signed away to me. You're just the creator of it. And I've gone behind your back and hired most of your animators to continue working on it. So you can take a pay cut and continue doing it, or you walk away altogether because I now own it. And so it was a long train ride back. This is where the germ of the idea of Mickey Mouse came from. There are a lot of rumors and legends about how when he worked in Kansas City, there was a mouse that would be in the desk of where they worked, and that was the inspiration. There's another story that probably accurate. Walt's first idea was to call him Mortimer Mouse, and his wife Lillian expressed displeasure right away at that. That was not the name of a mouse. So I'm not sure how they came up with Mickey, but that was the compromise. So Walt is back in Los Angeles. He's aware that a bunch of his animators are working on the last of the Oswald cartoons, and then they're going to leave him. So he and Ub and another animator or two that remain loyal have to work quietly around them, because they have this new character, Mickey Mouse. And they're going to be doing similar stories, just one-offs of Mickey doing oddities and adventures. The first two that they made were the Galloping Gaucho and another one that did a spoof of Charles Lindbergh. I'm drawing a blank on the name. Ub Iwerks single-handedly drew every frame of the first 3 Mickey Mouse cartoons. He was kept behind a closed door, so nobody knew what he was working on. And as they were doing the third one, which was Steamboat Willie, they realized that the sound concept of motion picture sound was a new invention. it was in play. And Walt says, well, we need to incorporate this into animation. And let's start with it with one of these, what we're working on now, Steamboat Willie. And it was a technical challenge because they had they could record sound effects like the toot whistles and banjos and whatnot. But Walt actually had a score. He went to see an old friend in Kansas City and had him create a musical score, and went to New York to have it recorded. And the first one was an utter failure because when they sent it back, the tempo was off. It did not match what was on the movies. So Ub comes up with a clever idea. We all know this when you watch a TV show and the song lyrics on the bottom, or if it's karaoke night, there's a little red bouncing ball that goes over the words. Well, Ub had done a bouncing ball just off frame as the film was being projected. So the conductor could see the tempo that he was supposed to match. And so the second recording was a hit. Walt had to sell his favorite roadster car to fund this, but in the end, it was worth it because when this was released in November 1928, this was not just any other standard black and white cartoon. This was a cartoon with sound, the first of its kind, and Walt is in business. He has captured the American fascination. They turn around and go back to Gallopin' Gaucho and the other original Mickey Mouse and reset those to music as well. And all future Disney cartoons include sound. So Steamboat Willie, I mentioned that was the name of the third one. Mickey Mouse mania is taking over. There are Mickey Mouse clubs being organized left and right. This is where the brand comes in. It's something out of his control that he's created, and it's led to a huge interest. And in addition to doing Mickey cartoons, Disney as animators want to have a playground, so to speak, of different animation techniques where they can practice different styles, different characters that'll come in and out, an anthology of sorts. And so they come up with what's called the Silly Symphony series. And the first one is Skeleton Dance, done by Ub Iwerks, black and white. This was from the camera operation, the way it zoomed in and out, and through a graveyard with skeletons. We're playing like somebody's rib cage, like a xylophone. It was captivating. This was a bit ahead of its time. So Walt now has 2 channels to create shorts. He's doing Mickey Mouse shorts as well as Silly Symphonies. And each one is getting more and more sophisticated, both in terms of the picture quality, sound quality, even the storylines. The early Mickey Mouses were just gag effects after another. It soon got to be actual storylines. The next major breakthrough was color. And the Disney animated short Flowers and Trees was the first to be released in color. And that, again, took a lot of technical experimentation at the studio, was helpful with that process. And Walt realizes in the mid-1930s, well, he's established. He's a key player in Hollywood. He plays polo. He's got a nice house. He and his brother live there. He's a successful company, and he wants to take it to the next level. So that means going into feature films, feature animated films. So he pitches the concept to his animation team of taking on the classic fairy tales, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And he acts out over one evening the whole role, each character, what they're doing, what they're seeing, what they're doing. And he sold it strong and hard to his cast. We can do this. Now, each 5-minute or so cartoon short may take a few weeks of production, probably longer. feature length is over an hour. Some of the early Disney features were probably just barely over an hour, but nonetheless, this was an ambitious project because they had to edit it out. All of animation is edited in almost reverse order. Storyboards are created. You'll create characters. You'll do mock-ups of what they look like. You'll do storyboards on. You have a background wall, and somebody is got a pointer that point at the panel, like Snow White is here and she meets the dwarves, and they come down the stairs slowly. So you kind of have the opportunity to refine the film before you start putting pencil to paper, because that's when the length and delays and labor charges add up when you're making a film. So they try to predefine what it is well in advance, pre-visualize it. And the film was in production well over a year. It was released December of 1937. In fact, at some point in that year, they needed more funds. Bank of America has a long history of sponsorship with Disney. The story goes that whichever bank manager came down to watch the rough cut version of the film to see if this was a worthy risk or not. The story goes that he left the room smiling and said to Walt or whomever, "You're going to make a mint." So he was convinced without even seeing the final product. So the challenge of animation is you are creating pencil sketches on paper. 24 frames per second is the known factor here. So for every second of film you see of a character going from pose A to pose B to pose C, you need 24 of those for just 1 second of film. And that's just the character. And so his lead animators will create poses of like Snow White and how she's supposed to be at frame 12 and how she's supposed to be at frame 24. The job is then handed over to in-betweeners because they're doing the animation in between frames 1 and 12 and then 13 to 24. And so it's sort of the lead animators do the major poses in the major steps. The in-betweeners fill in the blanks, and then they have to turn it over to the ink and paint department. And this is in the Disney industry, in the Disney era, animators were men, and the ink and paint department was all ladies. It was just the sign of the times. And they would trace over in black ink the animators' lines. The animators would pre-code what color paint to use for the characters. In fact, it was one of the ink and paint ladies that suggested Snow White have rouge on her cheeks. So that was their contribution to the film, one of many contributions. So released in 1937, it was, before it came out, it was dubbed Walt's Folly. That Walt has gone in over his head. He's made a movie that is going to cost him a fortune. It's going to bankrupt the studio. And Walt knew that. He says he had it all riding on the line. The movie was a critical and commercial success. And the Disney company we know today is here by and large because of the success of that film.
Can I ask you a question, Jamie?
Yeah, please.
I am going to a trivia night this week, and a lot of times it seems like they ask what was the first Disney movie, and sometimes people are arguing Fantasia, and I don't know, is it like the first feature film, or what would you say if somebody asked you what was the first Disney movie? Was it Snow White in 1937?
If we're going by feature length, it is definitely Snow White. So with the success of the film, Walt pours the profits back into his company. He goes to Burbank to build a lot there, a studio for his animators, a campus setting. I've had the pleasure of visiting the studios. It's on a guided tour. It's spectacular, and he even had custom-made animator desks. He had the windows in the hallways in the offices ideally situated for the optimal lighting, natural lighting for the animators as they're working on their desks. Because Walt is now all in on feature animation. And the next three released, we're talking about Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi, and Dumbo. And these were the ones that he was able to release before the war, because that was the next major pivot point in the Disney history, is how the war effort basically took over Disney operations. Physically on the campus there at Burbank, they set up anti-aircraft guns on the campus because there was a nearby Lockheed Martin factory to protect. And then within the company, Walt realizes he can't do feature animation because half of his animators are off serving the country. So with what he's left with, he does a lot of training films for the United States Army and Navy. He does some training films for Lockheed Martin on how to do the riveting process on airline assembly for people who have never done this before. The Disney brand also has plenty of history with World War II, in that there was one gentleman at the studio who responded to all the requests for insignia, for a nose plane on an airplane, a patch on a uniform. I'm not a military person, every unit, group, cadre wanted their own insignia. And so they had to go through the channels, put the request in at the studio. And one gentleman in particular was busy cranking out about 80% of that work. Also at this time, Walt is been influenced by a book called Victory Through Air Power. The war was very much tactically a naval and army operation. What we know today as the Air Force didn't exist until 1947, I believe. It operated a bit under the Navy and a bit under the Army.
It was called the Army Air Corps.
Army Air Corps, yep.
Sorry,
So,
our dad was a air traffic controller.
Great. So Walt buys into the theory by a former Russian turned US citizen, Army general, that the way to win a global battle is through superior air power. And by that, he's talking about long range bombers. So he writes this book. Walt is fascinated by it, goes to the brass at, the Pentagon. I guess you could have visited the Pentagon. It was built during the war. He says, I'd like to make this movie. And they gave him the cold shoulder because the doctrine ran counter to the Army and Navy philosophy. So Walt, on his own pocket, creates this movie, Victory Through Air Power. Mixed review of it. Walt is putting his money where his mouth is. He wants to see what we can do. Now, it espoused using long-range bombers, which were not necessarily available to the degree that they wanted. That I don't have enough background history on that to clarify. But as after the war, animators are returning, and Disney. Well, let me back up a second. During the war, he has another pivotal moment in his life and his career, and he had an animator strike. Some were arguing for unionization, some were arguing for veteran equal pay. Walt felt that he was treating everyone fairly, but he had his blind spots. He had his favorites that he played favorites for, and the rest were taking notice. So Walt left the negotiations to his brother Roy, and Walt took the opportunity to go on a government-sponsored trip to South America with a hand-picked crew of animators and musicians and story artists. And so they fly to Brazil, Argentina, the ABC countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile. And they are soaking in the local culture. The whole point of the trip was for goodwill purposes. This government agency had sent out like Orson Welles and other famous Hollywood celebrities to show that the North and South America hemisphere we were all good neighbors. The threat of communism and Nazis on the other side of the ocean, we want to keep that at bay. So Walt comes back, and per their contract, he's to create a handful of short films based on what he saw in these countries. They modified it, and they did 3 stories together in the first film called Saludos Amigos, which is Hello Friends. And Donald Duck is the feature. They introduce a new character, Jose Karaoke, and it's a hit. It is. And they proceed on the second one, which is The Three Caballeros. And this one, Walt tried to throw everything but the kitchen sink at it. He had a lot of live action, a lot of dancing, a lot of like characters stepping in and out of books, breaking the fourth wall, so to speak. He had a lot of fun making it, but it wasn't as received as critically as his first one. And the third movie on paper exists. It was storyboarded and outlined and called Carnival. It was going to focus on Cuba, but by then the war was over. The government agency that sponsored it was absorbed into the State Department, and that was the end of that. So post-war, Walt is leaning on this notion of a package film, of putting several 15, 20-minute short films together as one, releasing them to the public, because he's strapped, and his animated team is slow to come back. So Make Mine Music is one of them. The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Crane, it was part of a package film that focusing on the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And just have my train of thought derail right there. I know what it was. So a lot of the profits from Disney films, a lot of the profits were frozen, particularly in England. Post-war, they did not want the bank coffers to be drained by foreign owners. And so the stipulation to Disney was, if you can have your money here that you've earned from theater box office tickets, but you have to spend that money here in England. And so this, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Walt says, we are going to get into live action films. And the first film that they make is, I should have written it down. It's a classic, Treasure Island. So Walt goes overseas to England to oversee it, and it's a hit. So Walt has now entered the realm of live action films. And this is not the first, and clearly has not been the last. Another element that has been following Walt since the 40s is that he has lots of requests to see how films are made, like studio tours. And he really doesn't have the facility set up for that. And so he conceives the idea of a Mickey Mouse park, which would be on the opposite side of the Disney studio lot. And it would have a train that encircles the park and merry-go-rounds, just small amusement. And the idea kept getting bigger and bigger in his mind, to the point where, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. If we're going to have a park, let's really go big or go home. His brother Roy, who was always operating in Walt's shadow, was like the chief financial officer, so to speak. He says, Walt, we can't afford a park. We can't buy the land. That's not our core business. Walt says we can do it. And usually when they have those arguments, Walt wins and Roy finds a way to make it work. So they hire a consulting agency to help them determine the best location in Southern California in terms of climate, traffic, weather, population growth. And this company zeroes in on Anaheim. And so Walt buys up acres upon acres of orange groves. And that's where Disneyland is going to be. He bought all he could, and he later came to regret that he could not buy more. But it was, to build the park, he needs money. They got the money for the land. This is also the era of television, which is coming out. At first, a lot of the major Hollywood studios did not embrace television. They saw it as a threat. You know, why will people go out to see the movies when they can watch television at home? Walt did not take that approach. He says the two can coexist. There's different situations for both. There's opportunities for both. And he strikes a deal with the ABC, American Broadcasting Corporation, because they are a new player in the field of television, and they are lacking content. And Walt says, let's have you showcase the construction of Disneyland. We'll do a weekly anthology show of the wonderful world of Disney. One week you can show what Adventureland is going to look like. Another week you can show us what Main Street is going to look like. And it's a symbiotic win-win situation for both. Walt got much needed funds for construction of the park. ABC got content for its television show. And as a result, Walt had a much anticipated audience that much anticipated this park. Walt Disneyland today does not resemble what it looked like in 1955. Tomorrowland was like the last to get any attention. There are stories that there were weeds still in the bushes, and somebody said, well, write their Latin name on a sticker and put it in front of this. So people will be curious that it's something that's supposed to be there. So opening day is July 17th, 1955. This is the media event day. People had counterfeited tickets. Tickets are said for good for you and one guest or two guests, whatever. Well, counterfeited tickets plus lots of people equals a nightmare. And ABC is broadcasting this. They have Art Linkletter and actor Ronald Reagan on hand to film the ceremonies on hand. The park is overrun. It's already at capacity. It was a brutally hot day that day, and the recently poured asphalt had not fully cured yet. So ladies are walking around in high heels and sticking their heels in the asphalt. There was a plumber strike, so they could either finish bathrooms or they could finish water fountains. Well, they chose to finish the bathroom, so people were forced to buy sodas. They took note of that, like, well, it's too cheap to have a working water fountain here. That got resolved. The same day, there was a gas leak reported, which I think was quickly out as soon as somebody noticed it. Opening day was less than perfect for Disneyland, but it had his train, Walt's train, and I believe that Walt legally was the owner of the train at Disneyland when it opened. Before the park, he created an organization called WED Industries, Walter Elias Disney Industries, and he took his top animators over there and some of the top men from the fabrication office for construction purposes, and says, we're going to build a park. We want to understand or apply what our film technique has been. We want people to be in a three-dimensional film. And so all of his story artists and sketches and animators, that's how they conceived Wall Street. Main Street, and how they, Frontierland was an original attraction, Adventureland. Here's the unique thing about all the Disney parks is that on Main Street, which was heavily influenced, as you mentioned, by Marceline, Kansas, the buildings are all 3 stories tall, and yet they are not. The ground floor is full regulation height. The middle floor is maybe 2/3 height, and the top floor is maybe half the height. But because you are standing on the ground and looking up, your eyes play a trick on you. You see it as receding in height, which your eyes and your brain tell you is normal. That's a building when you look at it. The farther away it is, the less there is to see. So that's how they gave the appearance that Main Street is 3 stories tall. Main Street USA was also designed by an animator named Harper Goff. And he grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado. So some of his influence was also built in to the outline of Main Street USA. One of the neat elements of the park, which has been there from day one, is that on Main Street there's a fire station. And above the fire station, there is a single room apartment, which was for Walt and Lillian and grandkids to visit. And Walt would be up there. He was often at the park. Sometimes he'd stay over, and he had his own private apartment. There used to be a chimney, like a fire station pole to slide down. And somebody climbed up that pole, up into the apartment, and found Walt napping. And Walt says, "Who are you?" And the man says, "Well, who are you?" So from then that day forward, that hole for the slide pole was sealed up. But there's a lantern on in the apartment, which is eternally lit in honor of Walt. I've been able to do a couple of private tours at Disneyland where I've been inside the apartment, and it's kept up as it was built in the 50s. Everything in there, the furniture, the decor, it's a look but don't touch apartment, and everything about it has been well maintained and preserved from the 1950s.
Jamie?
So, yes.
So we try to keep these at about an hour, and I want
Okay.
to make sure that everybody, if anybody wants to talk to you, has a question,
Sure.
they can. And I also want to have you tell about the book that you're working on.
Absolutely. Okay, so I will fast forward.
This is so interesting. I'm not trying to cut you off. It's just that,
No, I totally understand. I get wound up. So the lessons he learned was that he didn't have enough land. And so he says, we're going to do something bigger and better. We're going to do an East Coast version. Again, they searched for land. Central Florida is optimally picked. Through secret companies and lawyers who are hiding their true clients, they buy up about 43 square miles of property. And Walt says this is going to be Epcot. He's fascinated with urban design and urban living. He says, first, we're going to put an amusement park in there. That's phase one, but I really want to have a city of tomorrow. He announces this publicly in 1965 when a reporter sniffed out who was buying all the property. In 1966, he makes a film called the Epcot film in October 1966, outlining what he wants the city to be about. And unfortunately, 2 months later, he dies. He had lung cancer that went undiagnosed for years. And so Roy pushed ahead with Disney World, and Roy renamed it to Walt Disney World, where that has been the flagship US park campus, given that it has 3 other additional parks since then. Epcot as a park was built, but not as a city. And that's where I think I'll wrap it up there.
Can you tell us what your book's going to be about?
Yes, I will try. I was going to do a share a screen, but let me, if I can't get it. As Sally knows, I've lived in DC since '89. I'm
Wait,
a
you might
huge,
be able to share the screen if I make
Yep.
you, if I,
well, I'm gonna
you
try to
have
flip
something
my
you want to
camera
show us?
around.
Okay.
See if I can flip my camera around. This is the cover of my book.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what I have done, my thesis was to find any iteration or connection that between Walt and the company has between Walt in Burbank and DC. I talked about the war effort. The Smithsonian Museum has plenty of Disney artifacts that cover the war. There are Supreme Court cases that were decided that involved Disney and the Disney company. I talked about how Walt had the animator strike and was there concern of a communist infiltration. He testified before Congress in 1947. And so that's in the book. You've got the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover had a dossier on just about everyone, including Walt. And it's public record now, and you read it. And Hoover was very, very, very concerned about how his agents were being portrayed in Disney movies. They're being portrayed as bumbling idiots and losing their leads, and the FBI wasn't happy with that. You look at Disney trademarks and patents and copyrights. Well, all three of those have their respective offices in Washington, D.C. and have to be adjudicated and patents claimed. The National Archives and the Library of Congress have lots of Disney memorabilia. I was not able to visit these buildings during COVID lockdown, but their websites, fortunately, are very robust and had a lot of great information. Oh, Walt in the presidency. Walt was, as he put it, my eyes, you can see the reflection of the red, white, and blue in my eyes when I look at the American flag. Very patriotic, very, very committed to the notion of the American presidency. We have in Florida, Hall of Presidents. Walt was closest political wise. He affiliated closely with Republicans. So Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon, both Southern Californians, had a lot of interactions with Walt over the years. And so I have a whole chapter dedicated to how nearly every president since FDR has had an interaction with Walt or the parks or both. The Congress granted Walt a posthumous Medal of Honor. Nixon gave to Lillian Disney a posthumous Medal of Honor that the president declares. I can't recall the name of it, but of the program. But the more research I did, the more smaller stories I found, and I don't want to give too much away.
Well, when's it coming out? I can't wait to read it.
I wish I had an answer.
All right. Well, you should be posted so I can tell everybody here about it.
I sent it to my publisher mid-February, and he basically tells me I've got to treat the books I have in queue ahead of yours, and then I'll get to yours. It's themeparkpress.com is the website, and they specialize in mostly Disney fan-written content. And I found them to be the ideal publisher for me. When I pitched him the idea, I says, a lot of this stuff has been covered before, but you are telling it in a new cohesive way. So that he signed off on that. So I'm waiting anxiously that I hope he doesn't rip it to shreds and that I get it back soon. And then once it's available on Amazon, I'll be publicly.
Well, I'm sure you got a nice little group of people here that'll be in.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just repeat that the magazine I write for, celebrationspress.com. This is
I want to take a picture of that.
Okay.
I missed it a while ago. Okay, let's see your face in there too. Okay, nice.
Yeah, this is quarterly. This is about 128 pages. There's a core group of writers, and I'm one of them. I write almost exclusively about Disney legends. Baseball has its Hall of Fame. Football has its Hall of Fame. Disney has its equivalent, the Disney Legends program, where they honor the men and women who have made significant contributions to the company. And so I always try to find somebody new, somebody old, I always want to find somebody that I don't know a lot about, because research is half the fun, finding out new things.
Does anybody want to talk to Jamie? Anybody out there have a question?
I do.
Okay.
I do. It's Mary Jane. Is it
Go
my
ahead.
turn? Okay. I was very interested. I'm always interested about Walt Disney. He was a great hero, I think, to so many people, because he truly did it his way.
Mhm.
So back to your mention about the polo, Mickey's polo game.
Yes.
I'd like to share a picture.
Oh,
This
great.
is Walt. This is Walt and somebody named Leslie Howard.
Hi, Mary Jane.
Yeah, wouldn't you know? So I've collected
who was
Leslie Howard for eons. So this is one of my favorite pictures. And this is Walt and Leslie Howard on the polo field at the Riviera Polo Club. They played very often. And of course, Walt Disney was critically injured playing polo.
Yep.
And was really incapacitated and quit polo because his doctor said, don't play polo again because you're not going to be able to walk. But they were great friends. And I want to share a story. Walt visited Leslie Howard at his house in England in the 30s. And there still are, at that house, out in the cinema, which is on the backyard of Leslie Howard's estate.
Oh, may I interrupt and tell everybody who Leslie Howard is, if you don't know who
Leslie Howard was Ashley in Gone with the Wind, but he made a lot of other films, but that's what he's known for. So when Walt visited Leslie Howard in England, Walt painted Mickey Mouse on the front of Leslie Howard's bar.
Nice.
And it was there for quite a while until some owners in the 60s decided to paint over it.
Oh, dear.
But I wanted to share that they were great friends. And I want to say, can I say one thing about Three Caballeros?
Yes.
I play the harp and I do a lot of songs that are Disney songs. So the song from Three Caballeros, and you probably know this, You Belong to My Heart. Well, when Disney sent his animators down there, they brought back songs as well as, sketches.
Yep.
And they brought that song back. And when they played it for Walt Disney, he said, that is a really beautiful song. But did I mention that this is an animated feature and that Donald Duck is going to have to sing that song? Yep. Well, Donald Duck introduced that song, and it was later recorded by hundreds of other lesser known singers like Frank Sinatra. So I just have to add that.
Mary Jane was a speaker. I don't remember if it was last week or the time before, but she has some interesting Hollywood stories. So, and she's a big collector of things about Leslie Howard. So thanks for jumping in with that, Mary.
Thank you. And can I ask you something about Three Caballeros? In your research, what were some of his opinions about that movie?
I think Walt enjoyed it. He liked the finished product. It was some of the feedback they got from the Three Amigos.
Three Caballeros.
Three Caballeros, yeah. Saludos, amigos. Some of the feedback from the first one helped inform the second. They wanted a more cohesive storyline and narrative throughout. I think Walt was thrilled with the final product. Like I said, they did a lot of live action film in it of local fishermen in Lake Titicaca. They did a lot of interaction of Donald interacting on the famous beach, Acapulco Beach.
Mhm.
Not no. Yeah.
Whatever they
Acapulco.
call it.
Yes. So they actually filmed that scene on the Disney backlot when they got
Wow.
home. They
Wow.
had everyone, they had umbrellas and beach balls, and you see sand. You don't see water anywhere, but they've recreated the scene on the Disney backlot. And they kind of pulled every trick up out of their sleeves on it. I think the other sidebar to that is that not only were they making movies to be shown to South American audiences and North American audiences, they were doing education and health films to be shown exclusively in South America. Hygiene issues, watering.
Mhm.
So it's that particular project. There's the book I used on is J.B. Kaufman, South of the Border.
Mhm.
There's also a documentary on it called El Grupo, that one of the sons of the person that animators on the trip did. So I rewatched it while I was writing my book. I would say that I think Walt was pleased with it, but it was also very, very over the top in certain areas.
Yeah, different, very different, very
Yeah.
different.
Jamie, I
And
got
I
a
had also
private message
read-
here from Patty Dodal, who said that the Charles Lindbergh spoof was plain crazy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing.
And unfortunately, she said it right after when you were asking, but I didn't have my little message, the side thing turned off.
Yeah,
So
I had.
well, we're gonna let you
mental-
go, and we've had a great time. Is there anybody else that anything else I want to? Barb, you want to say something? It looks like Barb's trying to say something.
No, I enjoyed it so much. And I have to say, I did get to tour Disney Studios in California. And it was amazing. So it was so much fun having you here. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll
Thank
put
you.
in another plug there's another Quality at Disney Museum in San Francisco that Disney's daughter, Diane Disney Miller, created. She has since passed away, but the Walt Disney Family Museum is in San Francisco at the Presidio. And that is also has a huge number of Disney related artifacts, both family related and the studio related.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank
It was
you,
great to
Jamie.
see you, and I'm sure everybody
Right.
really enjoyed you. You were great. I loved what
Thank
you said.
you.
It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank
We're
you.
going to keep in touch with you about when that book comes out. And
I will let you know. You're a long list of names of people I'm going to alert once it's out.
great,
Good.
great. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Good
night.
night.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Bye.